You're listening to the Red Man Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Red Man Podcast. Today here with us we have Chris Mosley, Associate Certified Entomologist, Tripp Brewer, and myself, Kolby Krohn. So guys, thank you for being here with me today.
Look, this is our first episode. And honestly, one of the reasons why I think Red Pest Solutions has decided to take on this thing, a lot of companies aren't doing this. There's a few, but most of the companies that I think are doing this, it seems to be more geared toward the pest control industry and people in that industry. And we're certainly targeting that area too. But we also want to target the consumers out there. We feel like there's a need for a podcast like this, a hole to fill, if you will, and we feel like we can do it. We want there to be a lot of useful information for pest control providers as well as consumers. But on top of that, the three of us, we all work for Red Pest Solutions. We like to have fun. I don't just consider these guys co-workers. They're also friends of mine. So we want there to be some entertainment value in these episodes as well. So without further ado, we'll kind of move into the summary of what today's show is going to be about. It's primarily going to be based around termites. We do have swarm season coming up here pretty soon. We'll bring you some recent termite news that will be of interest to both consumers and pest control operators. That'll be from Tripp Brewer. But before we get into that, we're going to spend a little chunk of time talking about the upcoming termite season or the swarm season, because we want consumers out there to know when they need to be worried and when they don't need to be worried regarding swarming termites in and around their property. We'll tell you what to do if you get a termite infestation in your home. And finally, we'll have an entomology segment, and we'll talk a little bit about some exotic termites. That's how I would call them anyway, mound building termites. They're probably a lot more interesting than you think. It's pretty impressive what they're able to do. It's just another example of the power of nature out there. But as I said, we'll go ahead and kick things off with Mr. Kolby Krohn on termite swarm season preparation.
Thank you, Chris. So kind of like you just mentioned, we're going into the swarm season. Primary focus here is what should homeowners be aware of, what should they be concerned about, and what should they not be concerned about, and what steps they should take to protect themselves and their homes. I know I can speak for myself. I know Tripp's there, Chris is there as well. Your home is your most important asset, your most expensive asset, your most valuable asset that you own, and it's a lot of money, and you want to protect it. Termites are the most economically significant wood-destroying organism in the world. They do more damage to properties year after year, and it's important that we understand and know what we're fighting and up against. So in the southeast, especially on the coastal regions, we really only deal with two primary species, one of which is the eastern subterranean termite, also known as the reticular Termes flavipes is the scientific term. That is your native species that has been here since the beginning of time, so to speak. And then we also, in recent decades, have interacted with a species called the Formosan termite, Coptotermes formosanus. And they're an invasive species that were brought in overseas from Formosa during World War II in shipping containers, pallets, and such into the ports of Mobile and New Orleans in Alabama and Louisiana. So they're relatively new, but they're making a big, big impact on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And those are the two primary species we'll talk about. We also have one other that's a little less common, and that's the drywood termite. And really, it's only found south of I-10 across the Gulf Coast, but it is also something you could run into. Really, first, let's talk about when you should be concerned. If your home has never been treated for termites, that's the original concern, right?
Sure.
You want to make sure that you have protection in place, whether it's with some sort of liquid treatment when the home is being built, which is called a pre-treat. Most all new homes have that, but those, frankly, just aren't going to be sustainable for the lifetime of the home. Those liquid treatments are only good for about 10 years, give or take.
Right.
Depending on
Termiticides today are not what they were many, many years ago. And I think some homeowners, they're just excited. They're getting a new house built, contractor. I mean, let's be honest here. Contractors trying to cut costs wherever they can. People don't like to talk about this, but it's true. And sometimes the termiticide that they use, it may not be really
to
what they
par.
should be using.
Or what's being advertised.
And then when you couple that with the fact that even if you use some of the best stuff on the market, it is just not as good as it used to be many years ago. So to your point, you get a false sense of security sometimes. And when I say you, I mean home or the general consumer out there that doesn't know any better. If you think that just because the foundation was treated before the slab was poured, that you never have to worry about termites again. That's simply not true.
Oh yeah, as soon as that liquid hits the ground, it's immediately starting to deteriorate from that point on.
Right.
So it doesn't take much, and down the road, it definitely gets to that point where it's
you leave your home unprotected. Absolutely. So talking a little bit more about what else you should be concerned about. So if you don't have the treatment, that's the first step. But if you do have a treatment or you don't, one of the first things that throws up a red flag, alarm bells going off, is if during swarm season, which runs from roughly the end of February through the end of the summer in the southeast, is kind of the time frame us in the industry kind of expect, right? And it could fluctuate based on the year and the climate. But during that time frame, if you have a lot of flying insects that you find within your house or around your house, so especially in large quantities, if you observe this, it's very important that you let a pest control operator know, let a good inspector know, take good pictures, make sure you're getting that identified properly, because it may not just be termites. You could have swarming ants.
Yeah, right.
You could have various other insect species that you could very easily get confused with termite swarming. So make sure you're being cognizant and aware.
And you
give it to a professional.
You prefer pictures. I would appreciate it if homeowners could get a specimen for me to look at. Maybe it's just because I'm older and my eyes aren't as good anymore. Because if you do a picture, that's great. It just needs to be really, really clear.
That's right.
And I get it. Some homeowners don't want to mess with the insect specimens, but that's just what I would prefer.
Absolutely. Just some way to identify. And hey, like Chris said, keep a specimen, hold it tight until somebody can swing by your house and take a look at it for you. And hopefully they're coming by anyways to do that inspection. Either way, making sure identification is the first step in any corrective action plan.
Absolutely.
So third thing you should be concerned about is if your home has been treated and you do find an abundance of wings and flying insects inside the structure, just like we talked about. But there's a few key indicators that could really be a leading indicator in what you have going on. And that is if you find a bunch of wings piled up inside your house. Mm-hmm. So when termites swarm, whether it's from a structure, a tree, a stump, a fence, whatever it may be, what they're actually doing is they're pairing off their future kings and queens of a new colony, going to start their own new civilization, new colony.
Right.
And they're looking for moisture and cellulose, the two things they need to survive and thrive. And normally when they swarm from outside of a home, when they're coming in, their wings get ripped off, they fall off coming in, so you don't see that many inside the structure. But it's a pretty leading indicator that if you find a pile of wings inside the structure, that's normally going to indicate that colony is housed somewhere from within. So that's certainly something that show a big red flag.
Big red flag if you see them inside like that, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So in conjunction with that, being a homeowner, whether you've had a treatment done or not, conducive conditions, as we call it in the industry, you may ask, what is a conducive condition? Those are any factors around your home that could make your home more susceptible to termite activity. So whether that's water up against the foundation, a roof leak, fungus, mold, even
if you have a
wood-to-ground contact.
A crack in your slab, an expansion joint, all of those things are conducive conditions.
A leak in the sink, anything like that. Like we just said, moisture of any kind and cellulose are the two things that they need to survive. So when these termites swarm, they're going to go to those sources. So if you have that roof leak, if you have that moisture source in your kitchen, that's where you're going to find them at. So normally, when we come and do our inspections for a customer and we do find termites in the home, whether they swarm from within or outside, we're always going to find them, if they have a nice house and nothing's wrong with it, in the kitchen, around the sink, in the bathroom, around the sink and the bathtub, anywhere where there is naturally going to be a higher humidity content and more moisture in the air.
And there's also plumbing penetrations in those areas that can contribute to the problem.
That's right. You normally see them coming in under poorly sealed doors, windows that have been left cracked open, through chimneys that have not been capped for the winter or
got issues
spring.
with spray foam insulation, holding moisture.
All those things are very, very important to look out for and keep corrected. And frankly, if you've never dealt with termites before, you wouldn't know but those are a concern normally, especially the spray foam insulation. That product can hold moisture up against the ceiling, the decking, and it takes a long time for you to realize you have a roof leak, and by then you could already have a termite infestation.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of conducive conditions, you kind of hit on it a second ago. It's obvious, and I'm talking to people in the pest control industry right now, conducive conditions are obvious to us. I think sometimes we get complacent with that, and we forget that we really have to explain that to the consumer. Not only this is a conducive condition, but this is why it's a conducive condition. I think we all just need to be a little more cognizant of that, because not only will it help the customer understand, it's obviously going to increase the odds of making them understand to the point of pulling the trigger and getting a treatment done.
That's right. So last time I bundle these last two concerns or red flags, so to speak, together, and the first of which is if your home has a history of a termite infestation. You could have had a termite infestation before you bought the house from a other homeowner, or maybe you've dealt with it personally yourself in the past. It depends on the company, how the treatment was done, whether it was done correctly or not, whether all the termites were found initially or not. So that's always a concern. If you see a recurring swarm, was that from the original infestation? It's not handled as of yet.
And if you just purchased the house, and if you've ever bought a house, you know what I'm talking about. You get this stack of forms, and you're just going through there signing paper after paper after paper. Well, there is a wood-destroying insect report in there. And there should be, if there was a previous infestation, there's usually an indication of that on that form. So if you're a new homeowner, you're about to purchase a home, I would strongly recommend that when you get to that page, tell the attorney, whoever it is, hey, stop, let me look at that.
That's right.
Because that will give you an idea of the previous history of not only termite, but any other wood-destroying organism infestation in your home, again, to your point, Kolby.
That's right. And lastly, one of the big things that, goes along with a good treatment for termites and preventing termites is just the inspection that comes along with it. Any good PCO worth their salt is going to do a thorough inspection, but both in the attic, in the crawl space if you have one, all throughout the house, around the perimeter, to see what not only activity you have going on with insects, especially termites, but what conducive conditions, like we talked about earlier, you do have on the property. So there's a lot of value to that, and that's really something that should be done yearly. You want somebody out there because things change and you may not know it. I know I can speak for myself. When I had a crawl space house a couple of years ago, I certainly wasn't crawling underneath that thing every year. It's a dark, scary, wet place that nobody wants to go, and that's kind of what we do, as a professional in this industry. So let the professionals handle it. They're definitely going to know what to look for. So we talked a little bit about what you should be concerned about, what you would see, different scenarios there, but what to do if you do, in fact, have a termite problem. So the scary thing, you've got termites. Mm-hmm. Don't panic. That's the first step. Don't panic. They're not going to eat your house down overnight. You may have some significant damage, and that's certainly a possibility, and certainly they will continue to do that damage. But you need to call a pest control operator, have somebody come out, like we said, do that quality inspection. If you're in South Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, call the Red Man. We'll be more than happy to help you out there. With that, we offer free estimates, free inspections at no charge or obligation to you. And we'll come out and take a look and let you know how severe it is and what we can do to help you out. Most importantly, know that we've got you. But if you don't choose us, there's other people out there. If you're out of our territory, out of our region, just call a good, reputable source and let them come help you.
Look at those Google reviews when you're making a decision of who you want to protect your home from either a current or future termite infestation. But yeah, it happens. You're at work all day. You come home. You walk. You're ready to just sit down on the couch, relax. And over there by the window, you see hundreds of these dead insects that kind of look like flying ants with wings everywhere. And if you don't know anything about it, you would panic. And I get it. But that's why we're having this conversation today. Hopefully, if it ever does happen to you, you'll remember this and you won't panic. You'll call Red Pest Solutions and we'll come out and give you a solution.
That's right. Because they swarm by the thousands upon thousands. If that does happen inside your home, it can be a very chaotic, eventful evening for you. I've heard stories of people in bed asleep and they come out at them and, in the shower and trying to watch a Christmas movie. All the time they can swarm, and it can really be a very distressful situation.
And the reality is, if they're swarming, they've been there a couple of years already. Yeah, so you don't. Don't panic, but don't wait. You don't need to sit on it. You need to get someone out to take a look.
It doesn't even hurt to just call someone to have an inspection done, even if you're not seeing these things. There's been multiple times when I know I've gone into a building to treat for just normal pests, and I look up and I'm seeing termite mounds, or I'm seeing things that like, hey, we need a termite inspection at this place immediately.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, they're active all year.
Just because you don't see them.
Right. They make themselves known with these swarms once or twice a year. But that's a good point, Tripp.
So let's talk a little bit about if your home has been treated or you are currently being serviced by a pest control operator and you think you have a termite situation going on your property. What are some things that maybe would help put your mind at ease as you communicate with your PCO and figure out if you do have an ongoing active infestation or if it's something that's going on the outside? Like we talked about earlier, if you have an abundance of wings on the inside, that's indicating you probably have it on the structure. If you really only find a few in the house and you really only find 20 or less swarmers, normally that's going to be those termites coming from the outside. Maybe you have a stump in the yard that needs to be removed that has a colony in it, or the neighbor's house potentially has an infestation going on. That's one of those items that will kind of indicate to you that it's not anything serious, but please do let your PCO know to where they can determine that. They're the professionals. They're the ones that deal with it every day. They can put your mind at ease and knowing that you have been treated. You do have an agreement in place. There's nothing to worry about. It's an outside occurrence.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about if a swarm occurs, you want to make sure you keep those specimens for the inspector to examine like we talked about already, and taking good quality pictures and a clear photograph. All of that stuff is super important. Heed that advice. Make sure that what the professional communicates to you, you're taking seriously. If they tell you to remove the wood pile up next to the house, a lot of people do that. That's a big conducive condition. That attracts termites. It's wood-to-ground contact. Take care of those issues. Because unfortunately, what will end up happening, any good PCO is going to do this, if they instruct you and document with you that you need to make corrections to a roof leak, firewood up against the house, whatever it may be, and you don't do it, you may be canceled as a customer with that operator.
Void the contract.
That's right. You're in a contractual obligation, and if there's going to be liability held up on the operator's side, there's going to be liability held up on your side. So make sure you're listening. Make sure you're doing those corrective actions in a timely manner, because at the end of the day, it's only for your benefit. It's only to protect you and your home and save you lots of money in the long run.
We say it all the time, and it is so true. Pest control is absolutely a partnership between the consumer and the pest control operator.
Yep, that's right. So last point here on what you should do when you do have a termite problem. This kind of goes back to what you shouldn't do, but we'll kind of address the elephant in the room. DIY. People who are DIYers, right? They want to do everything themselves, save money, cut corners. Folks, this is just not one of those areas where you need to do that. Absolutely not at all. First and foremost, in order for an EPA registered pesticide to be applied, you have to be a licensed pest control operator first and foremost. So what that means is a lot of the products that you get over the counter, whether that be at a Lowe's, a Home Depot, online, a lot of those products.
Your local co-op.
Yeah, your local co-op. A lot of those products are just at a lesser strength than what can be applied by a PCO. So that's the first issue.
Not only that, Kolby, but if you read the label, a lot of that stuff it specifically states, you have to be licensed. You have to be licensed by the state to be able to apply it. You can buy it all day. But if you go out and you start trying to apply it around your home, and I'm not talking about the monitoring sticks and things. Yeah. I mean the actual termiticides and pesticides. You can apply it, but technically you are breaking the law.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's for your own safety. And not only that, but if you misapply it, you're definitely missing the target pest that you're going after.
The safety of the consumer and also the safety of the environment. Yeah. You need to know what you're doing when you're applying that stuff.
Well, and let's not be remiss, and let's talk about the time commitment that's involved with if you were to DIY and do a proper liquid treatment. Of course, many of the real bait products on the market are not available direct to consumer, but if you were to do a liquid treatment, how much time is it going to take you to research proper application if you even take the time to do that right? And then that goes back to the problems you just suggested. How much time is it going to take you to do the treatment? How much physical labor is involved with that? People don't think of that all that much. that's just a big investment. And time is many people's most valuable asset other than their house, right? Their time with family, friends, doing the things they want to do when they're not at work.
Many of those products, they simply give you a false sense of security.
That's right.
I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah.
And you can pay a little bit now and put a Band-Aid on it, which is essentially all you're doing, if that. Or, you can go ahead and do it right, and you don't have to pay a lot later.
Yeah. I mean, I went out to a house once, and they said they were seeing some type of flying insect, swarmer. So the first thing comes to mind is termites. I'm like, all right. I go out to the house. It's in their garage. I look up, and he's like, hey, don't worry. I already sprayed it with some of this stuff I found. I'm like, no. Do not. Like, look, that's what you call us out here for. We're going to help you out, show you what to do, because what you're doing is you're using this product.
You're making the situation worse.
Yeah.
You're just moving them out to now we can't find them, and they're still in your house somewhere.
Yeah. So Chris alluded to it a little bit. There are stations out there that are used that strictly are just for monitoring purposes. So people will go out to the Lowe's, Home Depot, and buy these and think that they're preventing termites. And realistically, if nobody's actually monitoring those, they actually be making the problem worse because it's wood that's in these stations that's attracting termites to your home.
That's right.
So really quick, we'll talk a little about here at Red. We actually use a product called Centricon, and that's a similar green station to those that you can buy over at the Home Depot and Lowe's, except there's an EPA registered pesticide
And
in
except
that
it
product.
actually works.
And it does work.
Works
That's
real
right.
well.
So it has an attractant in it. So we're not the only company out there that uses it. It's the top pest control product, in my opinion, in the country. And what they've been able to innovate over the past 10 to 15 years, they've been studying it. The product was originally developed at the University of Florida and has been a tremendous step forward in this industry as far as how treatments are done and how homes are protected. And there's a few big benefits to this type of product versus that conventional liquid or monitoring baits that are out there on the market. And the first of which is an active ingredient, like we just said. It's an attractant to the termites. They don't know that they're eating it until it's too late. So they're not going to spread off to another area of the property. You're going to eliminate that entire colony instead of just some of the colony. And then the most important to me, and I think is really the biggest value versus a liquid treatment, guys, it's when those inspectors come out each and every year, you have those baits being checked, scanned, evaluated, pictures taken. You know if you have activity on your property, whether it's in your house or not, versus with a liquid treatment, it's kind of just spraying and praying.
Yeah, and a liquid treatment breaks down over time. A baiting system such as Centricon, which is the best one on the market, it does not, because it's constantly being maintained, as Kolby just explained, every year. So, yeah, I mean, to me, and I'm old school. Out of the three of us, I'm definitely the oldest here. I remember back when bait first come out, and as a pest control operator, many of us were very skeptical of it. I can tell you after couple of decades of this, I'm no longer skeptical. It absolutely 100% works, and frankly, I think it works much better than the traditional liquid treatments.
That's right. So with all that being said, if you're interested in Centricon and having us come out and do a treatment or anybody else, but down the southeast, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, call the Red Man.
Yep, I appreciate that, Kolby. So that was a good segment on what to expect when swarm season gets here and how to address it when it happens to you. Because we have a saying in this business, it either has happened to you or it's going to happen to you as far as termites go. It's going to happen, especially if you live in the southeast, this is ground zero for subterranean termite activity. Don't sit on that. Get someone out to inspect as soon as possible. So we're going to move into a segment with Mr. Tripp Brewer today, and this is on global warming, which is a hot topic everywhere right now. And you probably don't initially think of global warming and pest control, but there is a correlation there or connection there, and that's what Tripp's going to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure every single person noticed, especially if you're outside working this summer. It was hot. Where we were at, I mean, it was some of the record-breaking
very hot
temperatures.
summer.
I think Mississippi, since the 1980s, it was the longest period drought that we've had since the 80s. So it was very dry, very hot.
I mean, there's no denying that it was hot. I mean,
It was.
But with that, as the climate gets hotter, a study shows that termites get hungrier. Now, this is from an article from Ashley Manazzi. She was going over a study that showed that termites are getting hungrier as the temperatures get hotter. But their appetite for wood somehow being able to increase with these rising temperatures. That finding comes from more than 100 researchers across 6 continents who measured how fast termites ate blocks of dead wood left outside for at least a year in different regions with varying temperatures and rainfall. Amy Zahn, a University of Miami biology professor who led the study, said the termites living in sites averaging from 86 degrees ate wood 7 times faster than in cooler environments averaging 68 degrees. So from 86 to 68, they were eating a lot more. So increasing the hotter days driven by climate change likely means increasingly hungrier termites.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Different types of factors that might go into that. Nobody has measured that high of a value, so they're recalculating and checking. And Zan said it's surprising how sensitive they are to the temperature. The research study published actually focused on termites in the wild and not the pests. So there's a couple factors to this that you want to take in. But in fact, less than 4% of the 3,000 known termite species are the ones that are actually targeting our homes. So 4% of the 3,000, the ones we actually deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it be a consumer or in the pest control industry. Mm-hmm. A majority of these termites contribute to natural ecosystems, nourishing the soil and breaking down dead material so new life can flourish. Termites aren't evil. They have a place in this world. They go after dead wood, unfortunately.
Well, sure, they actually have a really good benefit to the environment, for sure.
Though these bugs are munching on the wall studs and windows, still, they weren't focused on those in the study. Zane and other researchers say it's fair to surmise that temperatures impact species in the same way.
There's a big parallel here. Has anybody here watched CSI before?
Yes.
CSI,
yes,
big CSI fan. I grew up watching.
I'm not a fan.
Sitting it on the floor with my mom and dad when I was growing up. But I've learned in recent years that when they're estimating the time of death of a body when somebody's been murdered, they are looking at fly maggots and flies to understand how long has that body been there, because it's a pretty predictable rate in which flies develop. And the only other variable with that is the weather and the temperature. So as that temperature increases, thus the reproductive, the life cycle increases and goes faster, the metabolism increases. And I find it very interesting that the same thing can be said here with the termites, that as that heat increases, the metabolism increases, they eat more wood faster. It makes sense. They'll
likely will be picking up their pace eating wood in homes and businesses as climates push the mercury higher. Researchers still don't know exactly why the termites eat so much faster in these high temperatures. It could just be how the enzymes in their gut respond to heat, similarly to how humans' hearts pump faster and metabolism speeds up in rising temperature, kind of how you were talking about. Research also indicates the indicated termites are particularly responsive to the heat. Her work compared the rate of termite eating to how fast microbes such as fungi and bacteria decompose dead wood in different environments. While the fungi and bacteria also sped up twofold in hotter temperatures, termites still took first place.
Wow, that's interesting.
Climate change could impact termites in other ways as well. Some species could soon start migrating north and south towards once cooler areas. With warming shifts in tropical climates, wood decay also will likely increase the termites' access to more areas of the world. They're accelerating the decomposition of wood in areas that didn't have termites, so that they are likely expanding and likely increasing their CO2 fingerprint. There's increasing research on how termites themselves might be increasing climate change.
So it's kind of a perpetual problem there.
Yeah.
Their eating increases as the temperature rises, and then as a result of that, they're also aiding in climate change.
Right.
Exactly.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Termites, similar to cows, have those microbes or the bacteria inside their bodies that break down carbons during digestion. And like cows, termites fart. So as they fart, they're releasing that gas in the form of methane and CO2.
Stop. Did any of you know that termites pass gas?
I mean,
I
didn't hear them.
I'd be lying if I told you I've never thought about that.
You don't smell it. You know what I mean?
Never considered that.
So it was really cool hearing about this because that it's interesting to think about them doing that as well. So while termites are tiny, there are an awful lot of them. A biomass that could be on par with humans or with cows. And their diet, wood, is an understudied storehouse of carbon. So if you think about CO2 that we're releasing, and like let's say that cows are releasing, termites are probably equivalent.
That's hard to believe.
It's weird. I mean, there's a
That's hard for me to wrap my head around. That.
I mean, you think about insect population compared to humans, we're vastly outnumbered.
Yeah, I'm
Vastly
not
outnumbered.
saying I don't believe it. I'm just saying it's hard for me to believe.
I know.
It's kind of one of those things you don't see it, you don't think
Yeah.
about it, out of sight, out of mind. But if you probably did the math on it, yeah, I'm sure that's absolutely accurate.
It's probably true.
There would be a lot of emissions either way. Cattle, for example, make up an estimated 14.4% of global greenhouse emissions, which contribute to climate change. It is still unclear, however, how much termites contribute to the global carbon footprint overall. Just because termites emit methane, though, not all that gas actually makes it to the atmosphere. Unlike cows, termites often stay low underground, which locks away carbon in the soil for longer. Another complication is that bacteria in the termite mounds, called methanotrophs, eat up some of that methane in the process. So it is tricky trying to figure out how much they actually contribute. But Yazotto is conducting an experiment in Australia now to measure the amount of CO2 and methane released from termite mounds to understand more about that balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was some interesting information,
Very,
Tripp.
very
I mean, there's things there that I had never heard before. Like I said, I've been doing this a lot of years, and I know you covered a lot there, and it's kind of messed up. With the only thing my mind is probably going to retain is that termite pest.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. So I appreciate that information.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
Like I said, global warming is a big deal in today's society. You hear about it on the news every day, and it's interesting how even the insect world has a connection there. So finally, kind of want to end the show with something fun and interesting. If let's say you don't care anything about pest control, but you're interested in bugs, still staying on the theme of termites here, I want to talk a little bit today about mound building termites. A lot of people may not know exactly what I'm talking about right off the bat, but let me explain it this way. Have you ever been to Disney World, either one of you?
No,
Yeah, it's been a while, though.
Both of
I
you?
went a
have been?
couple years ago, so.
Well, if you go to the animal kingdom, there's a safari ride there, the Kilimanjaro Safari Ride. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
If you go on that ride, depending on who your guide is that's driving the truck, sometimes they talk about them, sometimes they don't. But there are these huge, they look like dirt structures on that ride. They're termite mounds. And most of the time the guide will talk about them, explain that. It's a real tall dirt structure. It can get as high as 20 feet sometimes, maybe even higher in places.
It's insane.
Now, the reason this even come up, or the reason I thought about talking about this, is I recently read some a little bit of banter on social media where some people were arguing. I don't know if I'd say they were arguing, but they were trying to figure out, there was this disagreement going on about whether or not Disney was actually putting these exotic termites into our ecosystem here in the United States just for the purposes of this ride. I can tell you, they're not real.
Yeah. I've been holding my breath this whole time. I was like, I don't think those are real.
They're not. But there are people out there that thought that they were.
I'm pretty sure they'd get in trouble with a couple EPA and
well, I mean,
bringing a new species
can get
over.
why, if it was real, why there would be a real concern about that. But really, the ones that you see on that ride, they're really made of concrete. And I actually read that they double as a bird feeder, which is, I think, it's a pretty clever idea.
I figured it was for like the animals to scratch their back.
It makes sense if you put birds up there like, oh, and look, there's a bird eating a termite from the mound.
Yeah, exactly. and that's kind of what I thought,
it's kind
Tripp.
of a good prop.
Yeah, I thought that was a clever use of those structures to make them bird feeders. So, but they are indeed fake. So we'll settle that argument right there. As I said, they're made of concrete. I covered that. But that said, the animal that's depicted on that ride, these mound building termites, even though those mounds are fake, the animal is actually very real. We just don't have them in the United States. Now, we talked about how tall they can be, 20 to 25 feet. These things can actually get as large as 100 feet in diameter, that's bigger than what I thought, just what little bit that I knew about them. You can find them on 3 continents right now.
Wow.
As I said, one of them is not North America, but you can find them in Africa, Australia, and South America. The social cast of these termites are pretty much the same of what we've already kind of covered earlier when Kolby was talking about termites. And most people that are in this industry are already familiar with those anyway. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I can tell you that the colonies consist of 1 to 2 million termites. And in 1 year, these colonies of these mound building termites, they move around 550 pounds of soil and several tons of water.
Wow.
And that's another one of those weird things. It's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Something so small.
There's power in numbers.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. There's just so many of them. Now, here's an interesting fact on how they actually transfer that water. The scientists have figured out that they can move vast quantities of water across these mounds by forming sort of their own bucket brigade. Hopefully, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
We're talking
like
about bucket.
passing the bucket back and forth.
From the fires in the old days.
So, of course, our termites, they do not have their own little aluminum pails. They don't have buckets, but they do have mouths. So it's kind of gross. But
Spit swapping.
They literally drink the water and then spit it into the next termite's mouth, and then he spits it in the net, and it just goes on and on until they pass the water.
Firemen did that.
Like how penguins feed their young.
Right, and a lot of birds feed their young that way. It's kind of gross, but anyway, some of these termite mounds can take 4 to 5 years to build completely. Typically, they're found in well-drained areas, and as you can imagine, if they built these things in areas where there are lots of significant downpours and standing water, it would cause a lot of serious damage. And when they do get heavy downpours, it can cause as much as a third of the mound to collapse.
Oh, wow.
Much like the termites we deal with in the pest control industry, these work super fast to rebuild these damaged portions of the mound just as quickly as the weather damages them. And they have to do that. It's for their own survival. And if you were able to shrink down, like on that movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and go down in this thing, it's kind of like its own little city underground.
Its own world.
Which is interesting to me. It's an extensive system of tunnels and conduits that serve as a ventilation system for the main underground nest. So what you're seeing above ground, that massive structure, it's not actually the main nest. Now, if you broke a piece of that off, you may find some termite workers there. I mean, you probably will. But it's nowhere near the number you'll find if you actually began digging down into the ground below it.
So you've just pretty much broken their AC.
Right.
Yeah,
that is what
their
it
AC
is.
unit.
So they call them chimneys, that part that sticks up from the ground. These large chimneys that you see, I mean, I think it's a really impressive feat of nature. Outside air travels into the mound through the porous walls of these chimneys into a series of small tunnels. And eventually this air reaches the central chimney and it rises upward. And as soon as this fresh air reaches warmer air, it quickly cools and then it sinks all the way back down into that main underground portion of the nest. This process repeats over and over, and it keeps plenty of oxygen for the main nest, and it also keeps it cool. It keeps it from overheating. So it's really impressive to me how these little creatures come up with this stuff for their survival.
Yeah, it's insane.
As I said, you get down there, it's kind of like a city. There are exits that actually lead to the outside where termites can actually go outside on the surface and forage a little bit at night.
Really?
Yeah, they actually do some of that. Of course, at night it's cooler, and there aren't as many predators, I guess. It's going to snatch them up. The king and the queen, they have their own royal chamber down in this main nest. It's roughly, the only thing I could think of to compare it to in size is if you took a soccer ball and you kind of squashed it, deflated it a little bit, that's about the size of that chamber. And inside that chamber, I mean, the queen is literally producing thousands of eggs a day. I mean, it's amazing. And workers are constantly coming in and out and retrieving these eggs and carrying them to a nursery where they're fed compost until they become adults.
I wonder, are there secondary reproductives like other termite species, or does this species only have the queen producing?
I didn't see anything about any secondary reproductives. That's a good question. The thing that's always interesting to me is how we call termite queens queens. When in all actuality, they're not really queens at all. I mean, if you're going to classify them as anything, they're really slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's putting in a lot of work.
She is. They stick her down in this chamber, and the king is a slave as well. I mean, they put him down there and they say, hey, okay, you two reproduce.
Yeah.
That's
You can't
all.
leave.
You protect her.
You
and
cannot leave.
You pump out some eggs.
That's exactly right. And she's a slave. And all she does is produce more termites. And in the case of these mound building termites, these queens can live up to 50 years of this.
Wow.
50 years.
Doing
That's
nothing.
all-
That is
that's
all you do.
wild.
Every day, you produce thousands of eggs for up to 50 years. Now, the subterranean termite queens that we have in the United States, for some comparison here, generally 25 to 30 years.
Still pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's still a long time.
It's a long time. And now the other thing that's interesting to me about these things is they swell up. I don't know if you've ever seen an actual termite queen in person. I have.
I have, yeah.
If you find one in the wild, I guess I'll say.
Very rare, by the way.
It is
Extremely
very
fine.
rare. And as a matter of fact, back in the day, there were certain universities that actually pay you for those specimens if you could
Really?
find them. But the craziest thing, and I can't explain it, and maybe somebody a lot smarter than me can explain it, but there was one day years ago in this Centricon baiting system that I found a queen in a bait tube, which made absolutely no sense to me, and I've still never really been able to understand.
Funny that you say that. We actually have a photo of a queen crawling on the Recruit HD bait.
Really?
Yeah, one of our techs actually took a picture of one.
Well, the only thing I can think of is that maybe that bait station happens to be sitting right where a main colony was formed, and a baiting system that was already put in place.
It could be that. Part of the other thing it could have been is so when the way Recruit interacts with a termite colony is it's a chitin synthesis inhibitor.
Yeah.
So they don't mold. The colony's able to grow. And when that starts to happen, they try and actually relocate the queen. So they could have been trying to relocate her, and
that's like
an
one of the-
accident
yeah.
actually relocated her right to the source of the
Moved-
problem.
Moved her to one of those satellite colonies.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
once again, they don't know that's what's
yeah, they
hurting
start
them.
seeing those piles of bodies pile up. They're like, oh, somebody's sick. Let's move her. And
Yeah, they think that's the food source, so let's get her closer to the food source to where we can better serve, and then
That makes perfect sense.
That's exactly- it's
really-
that's probably exactly what happened because the bait station. I mean, the odds of them putting the main colony right there at the bait station is pretty
Yeah,
low
that's
because it's
very
right
low.
there at the surface level. So
That's
yeah,
right.
I like your explanation a lot better. But all day she swells up to the point where she can't even really move anymore. And to your
Yeah.
point, the only way that she can be moved is the workers have to move her. They literally drag her around.
it's like the Egyptian thing where you see them carrying the queen on the
It's
giant
not even that nice. They're just
They
dragging
just
her,
pick her up.
drag her through the dirt.
just
huh?
drag her through the dirt. She's always surrounded by workers. They literally tend to every need that she has. They feed her, they clean her. It's a miserable life. I mean, let's face it, it is. Mound building termites, believe it or not, they even do a little gardening inside their colony.
Really?
They maintain and keep a huge fungal garden.
What?
They eat this fungus that they extract nutrients from. So it helps. I'm sorry. They eat this fungus to help them extract nutrients from the wood that they consume. Keeping this fungus garden maintained also hinges a lot on the unique ventilation system that we talked about earlier. In a lot of cases, these termite mounds, they are so sturdy and made so well that they actually outlive the lives of the colony that originally built it. And there have even been cases where another colony of termites has actually moved in and taken
It's a free
over.
house.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought they were really interesting. That said,
That's really interesting.
we have enough termites to worry about here in the United States as it is.
Could you imagine?
Well, that's-
could you imagine having those termite
Well,
mounds?
that's what I was going to get back to is, linking the two together, your article and your article, if where you said they're currently located at, South America, Africa, Australia, that's
Right.
very hot, temperate climate.
Right.
If climate change is really progressing at that kind of rate, how long is it before these giant mounds in our backyard
how
here
do
in
you
South?
treat that? Do you shove a
Southeast.
Centricon station into the mound?
I don't know, but if you thought you had some grumpy people out there for having ant mounds in their yard, buddy, wait till you get a termite mound.
You're not
Oh,
going to
goodness.
knock that over with your John Deere lawn tractor. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do that, and you're probably not going to be able to go out there and pour gasoline on it and set it on fire.
No, and
That's
where do you
what-
put all the? If you tried to, where would you put all the dirt? You have a
Yeah.
nice manicured lawn, then this giant mound pops up, and you have to get rid of all this dirt. Where do you take it? Because the dirt's being brought from underground and elsewhere, so it's
Right.
being displaced at a large and vast rate. That's That would be a nightmare.
That
I
would
couldn't
be.
imagine.
That would be. We have to have a meeting on that one.
It would be pretty cool to be able to see one of these in person one day.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get the boss man to give us some money and we can go study one.
There we
in
go.
Africa.
We'll fly out.
Yeah, that would be. All right, so we're kind of reaching the conclusion of today's show. We hope everybody got something out of it. It was the first one, so we probably had some clumsy moments, but it'll get better as we move along. If you have any comments about it or criticism or whatever, we'll take either one.
Of course.
You can email us. We do have an email address. It's called redmanpodcast@redpest.com. Now, red is spelled with 2 D's. And again, that's redmanpodcast@redpest.com. We'd love to hear what you think about it or if you have any suggestions for future shows.
Yeah, and Chris, I think one goal for the future episodes, once we kind of get this rolling, is to maybe have a Q&A segment. So if you have any questions or anything you want to have covered,
please. We'll try to answer them either in that segment or we'll try to get to them accordingly.
Absolutely. We're going to have some social media set up. We'd appreciate it if you follow us on our social media. And listen, if you're in the Mississippi, Louisiana, or Alabama markets, and you have a pest issue, or you want to prevent a pest issue like termites, we would strongly encourage you to call the Red Man. We'll be able to take care of any pest or termite control needs that you may have. So until next time, everyone have a good time and keep the pest away.
Call the Red Man. Call the Red